Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to jump into a really fascinating period, the Delhi Sultanate, roughly 1206 to 1526 CE, and we're going to look at the story of how Urdu emerged as a language.
Yeah, it's incredible to think about how languages are born, like out of these specific historical and social moments. And in this case, we're talking about a time when you have the ruling elite bringing their language Persian into a region where you already have these diverse Prakrit languages, those ancient Indian languages being spoken.
Yeah, like a linguistic melting pot.
Hmm.
And the sources point to this happening, especially in and around Delhi, the heart of the Sultanate. And I was so surprised to learn that the word Urdu itself actually comes from the Turkish word Ordu, which means camp or army.
Well, that's right. That connection to military camps is really crucial. Just imagine these spaces where soldiers, traders, locals from all these different backgrounds are interacting, and they need to find ways to communicate. So this is probably where the seeds of Urdu were really sown, this blend of Persian and those local Prakrit languages.
So it wasn't just, words being mashed together.
Hmm.
This fusion of languages really reflects a larger cultural shift happening within the Sultanate, doesn't it?
Exactly. As Urdu developed, it became more than just a way to speak. It started to symbolize this new Indo-Islamic culture that was taking shape in the Delhi Sultanate. It was like a bridge between the rulers and the ruled.
That's fascinating. So if Urdu represents this cultural bridge, did it also challenge those existing ideas about language and identity? I mean, was language seen as strictly tied to religion at this time?
Hmm. That's a great question, and the answer is actually a bit nuanced. While we might assume that there was a strict division, the sources suggest that Urdu was embraced by both Muslims and Hindus. It wasn't seen as belonging to one group or the other, but as a shared language of this evolving cultural space.
That's really interesting. So how did Urdu make its way beyond just everyday conversations, in these military camps and marketplaces? Did it eventually find its way into more formal settings like literature?
It definitely did, and a key factor in that transition was the role of Sufi poets and writers. They really embraced Urdu and infused it with literary depth and artistic expression. This gave Urdu a new level of legitimacy and helped to solidify its role as a unifying force within the Sultanate.
Okay, so let's delve a bit deeper into this idea of Urdu and literature. What kind of themes were explored in these early works?
Well, think about the broader context of the Sultanate. It was a diverse society, right? With all these cultural influences at play. And early Urdu literature reflects that, often exploring these universal themes like love devotion and humanism. And these ideas expressed in a language that everyone could understand really transcended those potential religious and social divides.
It's like the language itself is weaving together these different strands of thought and experience.
Precisely. And, one figure who really embodies this cultural and linguistic bridge is Amir Khusrow, a prominent poet of the era.
Oh, yes. I remember reading about him. He was described as a master of both Persian and Urdu. It seems like he played a really key role in connecting those two worlds.
He was incredibly influential. Khusraw's poetry is a wonderful example of how individual creativity can actually shape the evolution of a language. And in his work, you see this seamless blending of Persian and Urdu, demonstrating that they weren't separate, isolated entities, but really part of this fluid, dynamic linguistic landscape.
It's amazing how one person's creativity can have such a significant impact on how a language develops. And his work seems like a great place to explore this fusion of Persian and local traditions.
Absolutely. It's a window into the heart of this linguistic and cultural blending that was shaping the Delhi Sultanate. And, speaking of that blending, it's important to remember that even though Urdu was gaining popularity, Persian remained the official language of the Sultanate. What do you think about that dynamic?
That's a great point. There's definitely more to unpack about how those two languages coexisted.
Right.
And what that tells us about the power dynamics of the time.
Yeah, it really makes you think about that duality, right? Urdu gaining popularity in everyday life and literature, while Persian holds this official, powerful position. What were the implications of that kind of linguistic hierarchy within the Sultanate?
You've hit on a really crucial point. The Sultanate's choice to keep Persian as the language of administration, the court formal scholarship, it had a significant impact on how power was distributed and how knowledge was accessed. So while Urdu was the language of the people, Persian was the key to navigating those formal structures of the Sultanate.
Exactly. Those who were fluent in Persian had a definite advantage. They had access to education positions of authority, and they could really influence decision-making in ways that those who only spoke Urdu might not have.
That makes sense. But then how did the growing popularity of Urdu impact the cultural landscape, especially considering this power imbalance?
Well, it's almost as if Urdu provided a kind of cultural counterbalance. It became a space where people outside of the elite could assert their own identity and create a shared cultural narrative.
So instead of just accepting the dominance of Persian people, found ways to express themselves and connect with each other through Urdu.
Exactly. Think of it as a form of linguistic agency. Even though Persian held formal power, Urdu offered a way for diverse communities within the Sultanate to communicate, share stories, and build those cultural bonds.
It's fascinating to me that even within a hierarchy, language can become a tool for expressing identity and building community. It seems like that tension between Urdu and Persian speaks to a larger truth about how languages evolve and adapt.
Absolutely. Languages are never static, right? They're constantly responding to the social, political, and cultural forces around them. And in this case, Urdu's evolution is intricately linked to the power dynamics of the Delhi Sultanate.
I'm also curious about how this dynamic impacted Urdu literature specifically. Did this sense of cultural counterbalance manifest in the themes or styles of writing?
That's a fantastic question. It's certainly something worth considering. It's possible that this tension fueled a unique kind of creative energy.
Hmm.
Perhaps poets and writers who embraced Urdu felt a greater need to assert their cultural identity, to explore themes that resonated with the experiences of those who weren't part of the elite.
That makes me think about Amir Khusrow again. He was fluent in both languages. Do you think his work might reflect an attempt to bridge that divide between Persian and Urdu, or even to elevate the status of Urdu?
That's a very insightful observation. Khusraw's mastery of both languages and his deliberate choice to compose in Urdu suggest that he recognized its potential and perhaps even sought to champion it as a worthy vehicle for artistic expression. His work could definitely be seen as a form of pushing back against that linguistic hierarchy, subtly challenging the dominance of Persian.
It's fascinating to think about how individual creativity can intertwine with these larger social and political forces. And it makes me wonder if this kind of linguistic tug-of-war played out in other historical periods as well.
It's definitely a recurring theme throughout history. Whenever you have different languages coexisting within a society, especially when there's a power differential involved, you're likely to see these kinds of dynamics emerge.
It's a reminder that language is never just about words. It's about power identity and the ways in which people navigate a complex world.
Precisely. And understanding those connections can give us a much deeper appreciation for how languages evolve and how they shape the course of history.
So we've explored this intriguing dynamic between Urdu and Persian. But ultimately, what was the lasting impact of Urdu's emergence during the Delhi Sultanate? Did it just fade away once the Sultanate declined? Or did its influence continue? It really is amazing how Urdu carved out a space for itself, even in a system that prioritized Persian. So did this resilience lead to a lasting legacy for Urdu beyond the Delhi Sultanate?
Oh, absolutely. The Delhi Sultanate eventually gave way to other powers, but Urdu's journey didn't end there. It continued to evolve and adapt and found new ways to express itself and exert influence.
I remember reading that Urdu went on to have a significant role in the Mughal courts that came later, which is really impressive when you consider the historical context we've been discussing.
Yeah, it really shows the adaptability and the enduring appeal of Urdu. Even though Persian was still seen as this prestigious language, of learning Urdu's roots in everyday communication and its growing literary tradition allowed it to thrive in these new settings.
It's like a testament to how a language can move beyond its origins and become a cornerstone of cultural expression across different historical periods. Do we know anything about how Urdu evolved during the Mughal era? Did it keep that connection to those early themes of cultural blending and shared identity?
That's a really interesting question, and definitely something worth exploring more. While we're focusing on the Delhi Sultanate period today, it's worth noting that Urdu continued to develop its own unique literary and artistic traditions under the Mughals. It became a language of poetry, prose, and even courtly discourse.
So those early interactions in military camps and marketplaces really paved the way for Urdu to become a major language of South Asia with such a rich history and cultural significance that goes way beyond its origins.
Exactly. And it's a powerful reminder that languages are never static. They constantly evolve and reflect the changing world around them. And in the case of Urdu, that evolution speaks to the power of cultural exchange, creative expression, and the enduring human need to connect and communicate.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to how a language can emerge, evolve, and become so deeply intertwined with a culture's identity. It's really made me rethink my own assumptions about how languages shape and reflect the world around us. What stands out to you as the most important takeaway from all of this?
For me, it's how Urdu's story challenges us to rethink those traditional ideas about language and identity. Urdu's emergence really shows that languages aren't simply tools for communication. They're dynamic forces that can bridge divides, foster shared experiences, and express the complexities of human interaction.
You're right. That's a really powerful insight.
Yeah.
And it's made me realize that understanding a language's history can give us a much deeper appreciation for its cultural significance and its impact on the people who speak it.
I agree. And it reminds us that languages are always evolving, adapting to new contexts, and reflecting those ever-changing dynamics of human societies.
Well, this has been an amazing journey through the origins of Urdu. We've uncovered the fascinating mix of Persian and local traditions, explored how Urdu became a unifying force, and even touched upon those complex linguistic power dynamics. I feel like I have a completely new understanding of how languages shape and reflect our world.
It's been my pleasure exploring this topic with you, and I hope our listeners have enjoyed it and found it thought-provoking as well.
I'm sure they have. And as always, we encourage you to keep exploring. Dive deeper into the works of poets like Amir Khusrow. Discover how language has influenced other periods in history, and maybe even think about the role language plays in your own life and your own identity. Until next time, keep on diving.